A baseline scan of Officer K Ryan Gosling. The team played with sliced up and dried out bits of fruit to get the perfect organic yet alien feel. Blade Runner 2049, copyright 2017 Alcon Entertainment, LLC. Imagining an alternate world to our own, where technology hasn't just progressed but taken a different path altogether, requires stepping away from the internet, the computer, and even the sketchbook, and instead studying thinly sliced pieces of fruit and bioluminescent algae. There were eyeballs in our fridge, says David Sheldon Hicks, founder and executive director of Territory Studios, the company tasked with reimagining the graphics for the technology in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049, which is set 30 years after Ridley Scott's original. Founded out of Sheldon Hicks' spare bedroom with two of his friends 7 years ago, the studio has since been credited with the graphics in films such as Ridley Scott's The Martian, where the images in the NASA Control Center scenes were based on real data from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, and Alex Garland's Ex Machina, where the blueprints of the humanoid robots designed by Territory are now hanging in its London offices. A bone scan in the morgue. One of the visuals, the team had to play around with dried up fruit and animal parts to get the perfect image. Blade Runner 2049, copyright 2017 Alcon Entertainment, LLC. How Lego turned toys into a blockbuster movie empire. We worked on the cinematic for a computer game, and very quickly we discovered we'd set up in a time when the banks were floundering, and everyone was going for the safe choice, big agencies or digital specialists, Sheldon Hicks says. Then, Ridley Scott's Prometheus landed on his desk, giving the team some direction. We found ourselves in a nice little triangle between story, design and technology. That's our sweet spot. It was a timely introduction. With the rise of Amazon Video and Netflix, a new design culture was forming in the UK and Europe. We grew out of that period, which I think is all a little bit unknown, a little bit unsafe. You had to find these odd little niche projects that you could attack that the bigger agencies couldn't and the others didn't have a specialism in, he says. Getting used to innovating is what helped them bring together ideas for Blade Runner 2049. With a bare brief and no knowledge of the script, they were told to forget everything they had done before. Blade Runner didn't even try to go far into the future, they tried to reset it, Sheldon Hicks says. Territory Studios had to imagine what the flying car would look like and how it would operate in a future parallel to ours. Blade Runner 2049, copyright 2017 Alcon Entertainment, LLC. Normally on a film you say, we're here now and we're here then, so if we chart this graph we suspect we're going to be here in 200 years' time. What Dennis said is go back to here and make the graph go the other way so you're not charting along the same graph as everyone else. The biggest and best film release is in October. Creative director Andrew Popplestone says that to get there they were told to imagine an entirely different world without knowing anything about the sorts of elements that made the world up. Without a brief, he and creative lead Peter Sne flew to Budapest, Hungary for a one-on-one with Villeneuve to explore new ideas. He started to elaborate on his overall vision and started to define certain rules. This thing happens, we now live in a world slightly different to ours. We don't have digital technology, we have a different kind of technology, so how does that work and how do we interact with it? The process began by questioning where technology had come from. We look at these devices, our phones, and you have an idea that it is powered by microchips and it works in a certain fashion, Sne says. But Villeneuve wanted something more abstract, more optical and more physical for the characters to interact with. The discussions we had were, what if this whole thing doesn't exist? How would technology work? Because there's a need for it, but if for instance you don't have a power outlet, how would you power your machines? Blade Runner 2049 director Denis Villeneuve is science fiction's Brave New Hope. To figure it out, the team became amateur scientists. They looked at how they could use macro photography on slices of fruit or fish or animal parts to create visuals for replicant brains, ones that showed the organic formation of a brain but not the firing synapses, so it looked more alien. They discovered bioluminescent algae and played with ideas to achieve completely new ways of creating color in devices or powering them up. What if there's a current that lights up these little animals and they end up a certain color? How could you put that into a device? Could you put that behind glass and excite them to emanate some sort of color? Sne says. The team also had to figure out how flying cars would work in an alternate future. Known as spinners in the film, they have 11 screens and what's closer to the controls of an airplane than the steering wheel of a car. We're working out exactly where those screens are, what size they are, how everything relates and actually makes sense. If you're sitting here, what information do you need to see when you're flying a car? Popplestone says. The team grappled with trying to get a balance between functionality and whether what they were showing made sense to the audience, especially when it came to representing data. In a scene when LAPD Officer K Ryan Gosling interacts with a massive database of birth records, they decided to settle on visual of something similar to a Rolodex, which had the physical touch that Villeneuve was after. He's looking at this insane amount of data and the audience needs to feel that he's more than human because humans are not capable of reading through these stacks. Only he could disseminate the information, however the audience still needs to get what's going on as well, he explains. One of Territory Studios' visuals showing the farmhouse is seen from inside one of the spinners. Blade Runner 2049, copyright 2017 Alcon Entertainment, LLC. Popplestone says this was the beauty of Villeneuve's brief, even with its scant details. It's taken back to basics, it's more physical, it's more optical, more tangible type of technology, it's got more substance to it and you can kind of connect to it. There's an element of plausibility to it. Achieving this is difficult anyway, but Territory Studios had to work around the fact that they were not allowed to know how each visual or screen related to anything else in the film. Popplestone says they were allowed to see and try to memorize a script for 2 hours in a locked room. And he says when he finally watched the film he didn't remember half of it. We started working on the concepts without knowing the script. What we did see was Joshi's office, 5 screens, and we were like, cool, so who's Joshi? Robin, right? And they're like, oh no, we can't tell you. The biggest challenge for Sheldon Hicks was where to actually reference the technology from in the first place. James Bond, for instance, works as an iconic snapshot of that time. It dates immediately and you should almost celebrate that, he says. But for Blade Runner 2049 it's different as it's referencing an idea that was relevant to a point in time 30 years ago when the original film was made, and referencing a future 40 years later from today. So what do? Do you make it relevant to that original time, or do you make it relevant to today? Sheldon Hicks says. Looking at it from the outside, treading that tightrope, and I think the only way that he did it was go down that Kubrickian timelessness, but this is where Territory excels. While Sheldon Hicks can't talk about them yet, many of the studio's recent films explore this idea of imperfections of technology and making it more tactile. I think that's what we do the most, imagining possible futures that make a comment on where we are now.